I spent 10 years with Howard Spencer, standing by his side as he rose from obscurity to fame, all for the dream of building a warm and loving family together. But then he told me, if I wanted marriage, I'd have to accept an open relationship. I didn't. So I walked away. He warned me I'd regret it. Yet, on the day I wore another man's ring, he dropped everything to crash my wedding. I blew out the candles on my birthday cake alone. By now, I knew better than to expect Howard to come home just for my birthday. The lack of hope shielded me from feeling too hurt. I slid the untouched cake into the fridge. At 2 a.m., Howard finally crept into the bedroom after a long day at work. Ever so considerate, he adjusted my blanket before sitting beside me. The night's chill clinging to him along with the faint trace of another woman's perfume. Happy birthday. His voice was laced with exhaustion, a testament to how draining a day spent entertaining yet another heiress could be. I kept my eyes shut, breathing slow and steady, heart calm and quiet. After a moment of watching me, and once he was sure I wouldn't wake, he dialed a number. Olivia, darling. I'm home. The warmth in his tone was unmistakable, a blend of tenderness and intimacy that had once been mine. I regret not spending more time with you. His words were a low murmur, soft and tinged with longing. I won't come home tomorrow. I'll stay with you the whole time, okay? Good night, love. After the call, Howard lingered on the bed for a moment before retreating to the guest room. I opened my eyes, sitting up to unwrap the gift box on the bedside table. Inside was a designer handbag. I recognized it immediately. It was Olivia's favorite style. She loved it because it was the first gift Howard had ever given her. Now, he'd given me the same one. Not out of sentiment, but sheer convenience. Howard had never cared about what I actually wanted. I was Howard's mistress for 10 years. At 18, I was beaten and humiliated by a group of classmates outside school, almost missing my college entrance exam. Howard, freshly graduated from college, happened to pass by and stepped in to save me. Orphaned and starved for affection, I fell for him at first sight. I asked how I could repay him. He leaned lazily against the railing, glanced at me, and said, "No family, huh? Then be my little sidekick. I'll take care of you from now on." And so I became his shadow for the next decade. I lived with him in a cramped, damp basement, balancing school and cooking for us daily. While he worked tirelessly, I stayed up night after night organizing his files without a single complaint. When the stress got to him, he'd chain smoke for hours, unable to sleep, silently holding me as he pored over documents. And then we'd do what only couples do. Perhaps God finally showed me mercy, because by my sophomore year, Howard's tech startup secured investment, and his company quickly became an industry leader. We moved into a sprawling mansion, and Howard, ecstatic, spun me around in his arms. "We're rich. You don't have to suffer anymore." I hugged him back, confessing with all my heart, "I love you." We weren't the kind to exchange sweet nothings, but I truly believed we were a couple madly in love. But in our third year together, I found photos of another woman on his phone. "She's the daughter of a new business partner," he explained, not even bothering to glance my way as he texted her back and forth. "I need to stay in touch to close the deal." I wasn't naive. I knew better than to buy that excuse. We fought loud, messy, and desperate. I even threatened to leave. Howard, however, looked at me as if I'd just told him the punchline to a bad joke. His perfectly sculpted brows furrowed slightly as he asked, "Connie, are you confused about something? We were never in a relationship to begin with. So how could we break up?" That night, I packed my belongings and left our home. But Howard found me later. He claimed his words had been spoken in anger, promising that once the company was thriving, he would give me the title I deserved. That was when I realized he might not love me. He was simply used to having someone thoughtful by his side. Yet I stayed. Because Howard had saved me. He needed me someone intelligent, capable, and easy to control, to help him build his empire. Connie, you're not an ungrateful person. You have to understand me. Those women mean nothing to me. It's all just for show. You're the one who truly matters to me." When he said those words, his eyes were full of sincerity. For a moment, I was transported back to the day we first met, when he had appeared like an angel and saved me from despair. The refusal I had been about to utter died in my throat. And so, I became Howard's secret lover, watching as he mingled with wealthy women to bring greater benefits to his company. The next morning, I woke late. Howard had already finished breakfast and was seated on the couch, reading the newspaper. A photograph of Olivia was printed on the front page. He stared at it intently, too engrossed to notice me entering the room. Years ago, when the company went public, Howard had drunkenly gripped my wrist, thanking me over and over. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be where I am today. I'll marry you. I promise." But once he sobered up, he never brought it up again. Maybe he thought the timing wasn't right. I lowered my gaze, gently touching my abdomen. Perhaps the time had finally come. "Howard." I forced my voice to remain steady. "I think I might be pregnant." Howard put down the newspaper and looked at me, his expression unreadable. "When did this happen?" "Just yesterday. I took a test, and it came back positive." I studied his face, desperate to catch even a glimmer of excitement. But Howard simply stared at me, his face devoid of emotion. After a long pause, he asked, "Do you think we're ready for this child?" "Why wouldn't we be? We'd been together for 10 years, built 3 companies from the ground up, and shared everything with each other. The company was stable, our finances secure, if not now, when?" Deceiving myself, I answered, "Of course we're ready. I love you. And you love me. Even if we've never officially dated, we've been together for a decade." Howard exhaled slowly but said nothing. Tears slid down my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. His reaction extinguished any lingering hope I had. "Forget it," I choked out, shaking my head. "You're about to partner with the Miller family. If Miss Miller finds out, it'll ruin everything. Come with me to the hospital this weekend," I added. Howard seemed momentarily moved. Hesitating, he stepped forward and hugged me, carefully avoiding my stomach. "It's okay. There will be other children in the future." Like a robot, I echoed his words, "Yes, there will be. Connie, you're always so understanding." He praised me in a voice so soft it sounded like a sigh. On the way to the hospital, I showed no emotion, as if there was no child in my womb at all. Staring out the car window, I felt utterly numb. Of course, I wasn't pregnant. It had been a spur-of-the-moment test, a way to gauge his feelings. But the result was painfully clear: I had lost. Completely. "Howard, how could we possibly have a future after this?" When the test confirmed I wasn't pregnant, Howard visibly relaxed. He half joked. "You scared me for a second. I thought I was about to become a dad." His tone held nothing but relief. I forced a smile and played along. "Right? You're so busy, you're obviously not ready yet." Howard ruffled my hair affectionately. "Exactly. Let's wait a little longer." "Wait for what? For you to marry Olivia?" "It doesn't matter anymore. I think I've finally reached my breaking point." Back at the villa, I opened my laptop. On the screen was the finalized version of Sunset Entertainment's latest star-making program, a project I had spent the past month perfecting with the planning team. Howard always assumed I spent my days idling at home. If he had paid even the slightest attention, he would have known that I am now a major shareholder in the country's largest entertainment company. 5 years ago, after stepping down from the tech company, I partnered with a friend to start another business. Eventually, he sold me his shares, taking the money to enjoy early retirement. That's how I became the sole decision-maker of the company. Because I'd been worried about not being around to take care of Howard, I chose to work from home. To him, it looked like I was doing some insignificant, cushy job. Seated at my desk, I hesitated for the first time. I unlocked my phone and sent a message to my assistant, "Please get my office ready for me." I once read in a book that the first step to breaking free from emotional dependency is to immerse yourself in work. Not only will it keep your mind occupied, but it will also make your partner notice your strengths. Sure enough, Howard began to sense that something was off. He called, asking where I was. My answers were always the same: at the office, or on my way to the office. "Is your work really that busy? You might as well just stay home," he said, his tone tinged with disdain and skepticism. His belittling of my career stung. I wanted to argue, to make him understand. But I stopped myself just in time. Would revealing my success really make a difference? That book certainly didn't recommend it. So instead, I redirected the conversation back to him. "Aren't you on a yacht with Miss Miller right now? Shouldn't you be worried about her noticing you're on the phone?" Howard was momentarily stunned into silence. Then he said in a low, drawn-out voice, "Connie, are you jealous?" Howard understood everything. He just never cared. He didn't need to comfort me, I always managed to soothe myself. Eventually going back to him with hopeful eyes. He rarely made an effort to console me. As if his so-called sacrifices were so noble that any dissatisfaction on my part made me unreasonable. I suddenly felt exhausted. The pile of documents in front of me, Howard's selfishness and indifference, my own forced maturity, it all weighed me down. I didn't answer his question. Instead, I hung up. Over the years, Howard had called me so rarely that I cherished every single instance. Even a few extra seconds on the phone would fill my heart with joy. But ever since Olivia appeared, Howard had been calling her constantly, no matter the time or place. Now that I think about it, Howard had always ended our calls abruptly without a second thought. He had never treated me the way he treated Olivia. With him, I had no self-respect. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. That evening, my colleague Anna noticed my low spirits. She invited me on a trip to Bondi Beach in Australia. "Do you have a visa?" she asked. Yes. Last month, I had planned a trip to Australia for a company inspection and wanted Howard to come with me. At the time, he was busy with work, and without looking up, he casually agreed. Later, he said something had come up and he couldn't leave the country. I shelved the trip I had so carefully planned. By nightfall, Anna and I were packed and on an international flight. When we landed, Howard had sent a single text: "Don't be mad. Come back soon." I saw it after an hour-long drive to the hotel. I stared at it for a moment before deleting it from my inbox. Anna, one of the few people who knew about my secret relationship with Howard, didn't miss a thing. Her concern was evident. "How are things with Howard?" she asked. "Same as always." Anna handed me a bottle of wine. "Drink this. It'll help you forget everything." "I can't forget." I poured the wine into an iced glass, tilted my head back, and took a long gulp. Staring at the ceiling, I slowly said, "Tell me, how did I endure all these years? Watching him use my gratitude to hurt me, watching him tangle with other women? Anna, am I really that stupid?" Anna sighed, walking over to hug me. "You're not stupid. You just magnified your initial gratitude into something overwhelming. It's made your love for Howard come with a moral burden. I know there's no point in telling you to leave him now. So, Connie, I just hope you can get what you truly want." We lay by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching fireworks light up the sky. Anna's laughter faded suddenly. I turned to her, noticing her gaze fixed on her phone, which displayed a gossip website. Something felt off. I asked her what was wrong. Anna pressed her lips together hesitantly before managing to say, "Howard and Miss Miller were photographed entering a hotel. When I returned home, I brought small gifts for all my colleagues. Lily from finance accepted hers with a sly grin. While you were gone, a very handsome man came looking for you. I think his name was Howard, she said, her tone teasing. He said to find him as soon as you got back. Howard? Coming to find me? I opened my phone and saw the messages he'd sent while it had been off. Did you make it to the hotel? Why aren't you replying? Did you see the news? It's all nonsense. Don't take it to heart. Still jealous? Don't worry. You're the most important person. No one can replace you. Connie, come back soon. I've got a gift for you. Liar. Even now, Howard was trying to string me along. The television played the local news. A photo of Olivia and Howard filled the screen. I stared at the grainy broadcast, numb, unable to taste the food in my mouth. They were getting married. The wedding was set for September. And I was about to become the intruder standing between them. Self-respect can be compromised, but it can't be entirely abandoned. I couldn't keep making mistakes. At home, I began packing up the personal items I'd left at Howard's place. When he came back, he was greeted by several large boxes and me. About to leave. His brow furrowed deeply as he grabbed my wrist tightly. Who gave you permission to leave? I yanked my hand away. I don't need anyone's permission to walk away. Howard sighed, looking at me in confusion. Why are you being so unreasonable? I told you it's all just for show. This is me being unreasonable? I hurled the suitcase to the floor and raised my voice. What's next? Are you going to have me deliver condoms when you sleep with her? I couldn't help but laugh bitterly, because knowing Howard, it didn't seem far-fetched. That's why I didn't want to be understanding anymore. Let's break up. I don't want to be the other woman. Standing in the home we had painstakingly built together, I began to cry. In that moment, I finally realized how much I had degraded myself for Howard's sake. I couldn't even say break up. How could I? We were never truly in a relationship. How do you break something that never existed? Rupture seemed far more fitting. Howard's dark eyes flickered with something unreadable. His sharp, chiseled features remained unshaken, calm. As though he were merely a spectator to my one-woman drama. I won't agree to this. Name any condition you want, as long as we don't separate. I wiped away my tears, laughing bitterly. Fine. Let's get married. Howard shook his head immediately, not even bothering to think it over. Don't be ridiculous. I'll agree to anything except marriage. Even if I were to marry, it'd have to be an open relationship. And it would have to remain strictly confidential. Howard pinched the bridge of his nose wearily. Olivia likes me a lot. I can't give up the Miller family's resources. Can you accept that? He sounded like he was granting me some kind of favor. Granting me the privilege to stay by his side, like a loyal dog. I slowly, inch by inch, traced the contours of the man I loved so deeply with my gaze. I asked him. Howard, do you love me? He hesitated for a long time before nodding. Of course. I pressed further. Do you love me? This time, he sounded annoyed. I said yes. How many times do you need to hear it? I stared at him blankly, wanting to ask why he couldn't just say the words I love you clearly and wholeheartedly. If he truly loved me, why couldn't he bring himself to say it? Outside, the fierce wind lashed tree branches against the window. And the torrential rain seeped through the slightly ajar window, sending a chill through me. Howard had already made arrangements to prevent the movers from entering the neighborhood. He stood coldly, watching my petite figure struggle to drag my oversized suitcase to the gate, stumbling along the way. Such childishness. He always believed that creating obstacles would make me give up. Foolishly waiting for me to apologize like I had so many times before. What he didn't realize was that my mind was made up. It wasn't until I deleted my fingerprint from the house's door lock that panic flashed in his eyes. He tried to stop me, his tone unsteady. Are you serious? This is our home. Where do you think you're going? Our tugging at each other soon drew attention from passers-by. To avoid making a scene, I followed Howard back into the yard, took a deep breath, and suppressed my emotions. This house is yours. It's not my home. It is. I've never felt it wasn't yours too. I reminded him gently, Howard, we're not married. Howard grew frustrated. He always shoved the fingertips of his left hand into his pocket when he was agitated. Why are you bringing up marriage again? I'm exhausted today. I don't have time for your tantrums. I remembered every detail about him, every one of his preferences. Yet he couldn't remember that I hated infidelity, despised waiting endlessly, and loathed shattered hopes. Even now, he thought I was just throwing a fit. I shook my head, suddenly finding the man before me unrecognizable. The proud, rebellious boy I once knew had disappeared, replaced by the hypocritical version of himself he used to despise. Howard, I don't love you anymore. Howard's only response was to warn me not to regret it. And I did regret it every second I stayed with him before walking out of that villa. I moved into Anna's place, sharing her home. She treated me far better than Howard ever had. Sis. Welcome to freedom. As I stepped through the door, confetti rained down on me. Anna rushed over like a whirlwind and pulled me into a tight hug. Finally, you can fully reclaim your life. Congratulations. The girls in the company's planning department miss you so much. I had helped the planning department girls complete several major cases before, and they still fondly remembered those days working together. I hugged Anna tightly, tears streaming down my face. I used to think I wasn't good enough, that Howard didn't love me because I lacked something. But if I was truly incapable, why would Howard beg me to stay and run his company, unwilling to let me go? Leaving him was like breaking free from a cage and soaring back into the sky. A sense of rebirth and liberation surged through my soul, screaming, "Welcome back, Connie." Clenching my fists, I vowed to make something of myself. I didn't seek out news about Howard, but it always found its way to me. His wedding was set to take place on a private island. He had custom fireworks made for Olivia, and they attended interviews together, gazing at each other sweetly, their hands tightly clasped, seemingly inseparable. To my surprise, I felt nothing. Because my latest proposal had achieved tremendous success, earning the company a projected bonus of $1 million. When I poured my energy into my career, men seemed insignificant. After some negotiations, I sold the shares I held in Howard's tech company to several parties, including Damon. The transaction earned me an additional $3 million within a month. It wasn't long before Howard called, his voice sharp with anger. How dare you sell your shares to Damon? You know he's been after my position for years. I replied, somewhat helplessly, because you blocked the normal acquisition offers from other shareholders. Damon was the only one willing to buy them at a high price. There was silence on the other end for a moment before Howard spoke again, sounding exasperated. Connie, are you still angry? Can't you just adjust your emotions a little? I'm not some automatic faucet, adjust your damn self. I'm blocking you now. So don't call me again. I hung up, feeling a rush of relief. Looking at myself in the mirror, I was surprised to see a rosy glow on my cheeks and an undeniable energy in my expression. Letting it all out really worked wonders. Since then, Howard truly hadn't contacted me. My words must have wounded his male pride. A few days later, I had an unexpected visit from the tax authorities. Luckily, in all my years running a business, my only strict rule for the finance department had been honesty. They found nothing. Any minor discrepancies were promptly corrected, and thanks to our cooperation, the whole ordeal passed without incident. Later, I learned through my network that someone had reported my company for tax evasion. This time, I took the initiative to contact Howard. Before I could say a word, his smug, unhurried voice came through the line. What's wrong, Connie? If you come back to me, I promise I won't target your company anymore. I was stunned by his audacity. Laughing, I said, and your company? Don't tell me you're unaware of how many bad debts you're sitting on. Let me warn you, if you keep provoking me, I can't guarantee what secrets I might let slip to the authorities. Connie. You've really changed. You never used to be this aggressive. I hung up again, relishing the power of being the one to end the call. The satisfaction of hanging up first, it was exhilarating. As if Howard's antics weren't enough, another headache had surfaced. A newly signed male actor in the company had been unusually attentive toward me. Anna whispered to me one day. He's had a crush on you for 6 years. Since he was 18. He's been too shy to confess and asked me to pass along the message. Having lost all faith in men, I dismissed it with a casual remark. Probably just a gold digger looking for connections. Ignore him. The next day, I ran into this so-called gold digger at the office. Frowning, I couldn't help but comment on his outfit. Chris, why are you dressed like that at work? He was wearing a gaudy t-shirt, pants plastered with brand logos, a diamond-encrusted watch worth a fortune, and an outrageously thick gold chain around his neck. Dear God, what was this style? If his fans saw this, a year's worth of the company's marketing efforts would be wasted. Chris had a strikingly handsome face, but after my critique of his fashion choices, his neck flushed red all the way to his ears. You don't like it? It's just, my family's pretty well off, so I enjoy dressing this way. I stared at him, speechless. I am not a gold digger, he stammered, scratching his head awkwardly. The clash of his excessive accessories created a cacophony of metallic sounds, making it almost painful to watch. I nearly burst out laughing on the spot. Later, I learned that years ago, during Howard's business networking days, we had attended an event at Chris's father's estate. At the time, I had been wearing a red dress, looking radiant and poised, my demeanor graceful and refined. I was hiding behind the staircase, watching you. You even waved me over and gave me a piece of candy. Connie, have you forgotten all about it? I was momentarily at a loss for words. Back then, my mind had been consumed with worries about supply chain issues for production lines. Adding to my frustration was Howard growing closer to Olivia, leaving me too distracted to remember a fleeting moment with Chris. It turned out that Chris had asked his mother to give Olivia's father some advice, which ultimately convinced him to collaborate with Howard. That partnership had propelled Howard's company into a meteoric rise. Howard gained immeasurable wealth, giving him the audacity to seek out other women, while I had become increasingly drained and miserable. What a cruel twist of fate. After spending some time around Chris, I discovered he was a genuinely endearing person. Though already 24, he still blushed every time he spoke to me. During a company outing, he was particularly attentive, but never in an overbearing way. It felt as if taking care of me was second nature to him. His earnestness was so disarming that even I started feeling guilty about teasing him too much. I had no choice but to tell him honestly, I'm sorry, Chris. I recently came out of a failed relationship, so I might not be able to respond to your feelings. He froze for a few seconds, then rubbed his nose and forced a carefree smile. I get it. You probably need someone more mature who can take care of you, not someone as childish as me. I paused, just about to comfort him, but he had already adjusted himself. He stood up, grinning brightly. Connie, as a friend, can I take you to dinner? He looked like a big puppy wagging its tail, begging to be petted. I couldn't refuse. At dinner, we talked for hours. He listened attentively to my ideas about the company's growth and offered gentle, thoughtful opinions when he disagreed. We found we shared many perspectives, and the conversation left us both energized. When it was time to part, I felt a bit reluctant. He dropped me off at Anna's house and waved dramatically, wearing a mask and sunglasses. Goodbye. Leaning on the windowsill, I watched him leave, my heart inexplicably softened. Chris was a naturally gifted actor. Without any personal bias, I lined up a variety of scripts for him after returning from the US, but he only picked one, a public service advertisement. Connie, will you play the female lead? Please? I refused outright. Laughing. I'm not photogenic. I look terrible on camera. Chris's eyes widened in disbelief. If you're not beautiful, then there's no such thing as beauty in this world. Still, I turned him down. When Anna found out, she looked puzzled. Darling, you're gorgeous. Why do you always act so insecure? I stared at my reflection in the mirror, unsure. Really? Absolutely. Just this afternoon. Some of Chris's fans posted photos of him from the Japan trip. One of them caught you two together, and now people are flooding the comments asking who the stunning woman next to Chris is. Anna gawked at me. You're his boss, and you didn't know this? You're trending. You're the top gossip headline. Beautiful and brilliant young CEO, even novels wouldn't dare write a character like that. I'd always felt insecure because of Howard's indifference. But scrolling through those fans' comments, all praising my accomplishments, I felt something entirely new: validation. It felt good to be seen. For the first time, I realized that loving Howard had been the only stain on my life. Once I broke free of that cage, I saw myself clearly. Without his so-called shelter, my world had never reigned in the first place. On a business trip to Uptown, I ran into Howard at the hotel. What a coincidence. Out of all the five-star hotels, we ended up in the same one, even on the same floor. I had just returned from inspecting a concert venue, disheveled and unkempt. Howard, escorting Olivia, walked past me with a smirk. He handed me a key card. Connie? What a surprise to see you here too. He glanced fondly at Olivia. I brought Olivia here for a little getaway. Care to join us? I've got an extra room. Howard must have thought I still cared about him and was trying to bait me with reverse psychology. What a clown. I handed the key card back to his assistant and turned to Olivia with a polite smile. Miss Mill, when's the wedding? Congratulations on becoming Mrs. Spencer soon. Olivia, ever the hopeless romantic, lit up at the mention of Mrs. Spencer. She clung to Howard's arm even tighter. Beaming. It's at the end of the month. Howard mentioned you're his cousin? Give me your address. I'll personally deliver the invitation. There's no need, Olivia, Howard interjected hastily. But I cut him off smoothly. Oh, I wouldn't dare trouble you. Have your secretary deliver it instead. Staring at the innocent little girl in front of me, I sighed inwardly. Putting aside my previous resentment toward her, I couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for her. If she knew that Howard and I had been entangled for 10 years, and that he had been involved with numerous women during that time, I wonder how she would react. How much would she collapse upon learning the truth? After some small talk, I excused myself to retreat to my room to rest. Howard called out to me, "Are you sure you're okay on your own? Should I arrange something for you?" I had already walked a few meters away, but upon hearing his voice, I turned back with a sweet smile. No need, someone is waiting for me. I thought to myself, that last sentence before I left must have really triggered Howard's nerves. Otherwise, he wouldn't have risked Olivia discovering him. Frantically calling and texting me. I curled the corner of my lips and turned off my phone. Chris stepped out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel and asked, "Who was that?" I could hear the ringtone while I was in there. My gaze quickly glanced over his toned abs and the distinct lines of his V-shaped muscles. I shook my head. Just a scam call. Anna, who had also seen Chris's perfect physique, screamed, "Oh my God." My eyes. She immediately covered her eyes. I couldn't help but laugh. It's just abs, come on, it's not that bad. Anna shook her head wildly. No, no, no. That's not something I can look at. That belongs to Connie, only Connie. Chris, could you please put a shirt on? Chris's face darkened. He quickly wrapped himself up, his expression serious. I thought I was the only one in here with Connie. I was momentarily speechless. Stunned by his straightforward comment. What? Anna laughed from the side. You two are too cute. When are you going to ask me to be your wedding bridesmaid? Anna's teasing made me feel a bit embarrassed. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Chris awkwardly rubbing his nose, not responding, as he stiffly reached for his phone. I didn't need to look closely to recognize his phone wallpaper. It was a photo of me. After Anna's little outburst, we nearly forgot the main matter at hand. Anna's 5-year anniversary concert was coming up in Uptown, and I took it very seriously. I personally arranged for a few famous singers, who were also my friends, to attend and hype up the event. When Anna found out that her idol would also be performing with her at the concert, she excitedly hugged me and spun me around. After the excitement died down, we finalized the event details for the concert and then retreated to our rooms to rest. Although our rooms were only a few steps apart, Chris insisted on walking me to my door. His voice was slightly downcast. I saw that he's on this floor too. If he comes to look for you, could you not open the door? I froze, avoiding his gaze in a fluster, and nodded. Okay. I closed the door behind me and sat dazedly on the bed. So Chris knew everything. Selfishly, I reveled in Chris's affection. He drove me to the beach at sunrise, and except for when we had work commitments, he made sure to bring me different kinds of cookies he personally baked every day. He always asked for my opinions and never acted like Howard, with his domineering attitude. I had met many men who showed interest in me, but none of them had the qualities I liked in Chris: sincerity, passion, and persistence. The feeling that he wasn't approaching me for any ulterior motive. It had been so long since I felt that. So I only thought for a moment, how long would it take for me to recover if I lost Chris's companionship? That's why, when he texted me at 4 a.m. asking if I wanted to watch the sunrise, I agreed without hesitation. The morning dew in autumn was cold. Chris wrapped his coat around me and found a clean stone to sit on. His breath enveloped me, and I, with my mind not quite clear, said, "You know, Howard and I were together for 10 years. Yes. I know. Does it not bother you?" In fact, it does bother me. Chris's expression remained calm. I mind that you've been in pain because of him for 10 years. And I wasn't there by your side. Tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. Why do you like me? Chris smiled gently. Actually, it was when you were negotiating with my dad over a contract. Your confidence at that moment completely captivated me. My dad can be really hard to deal with, so I thought you were an incredible woman. You are the most determined, capable female entrepreneur I've ever seen. It's a shame you stepped down shortly after. I changed careers to become an actor and joined your company because I wanted to follow you. And then, when I saw you at the company, I realized I wasn't just admiring you anymore. I didn't realize I was that amazing. A flood of emotions overwhelmed me. Years of self-doubt dissolved into nothingness as the sun slowly rose. As the sun rose above the horizon, Chris took out a delicate box from his pocket. I opened it to find a piece of candy. The packaging looked familiar, but I couldn't quite remember why. I gazed at him in confusion, and Chris slowly said, "This is the candy you gave me when we first met. I bought the same one to give back to you." Chris carefully unwrapped the candy, gently placed it in my mouth, and said, "Connie, I hope you'll always be happy from now on." At that moment, it felt like all the pain I had carried for years was wrapped in countless gentle forces. I gently kissed Chris's forehead and said, "Chris, let's be together." Looking back at the past 10 years, the only word I could use to sum it up was foolish. Did I really love Howard? Or was it the heavy moral shackles I placed on myself that I loved? In 10 years, I paid back the debt I owed Howard. I was finally free. Falling for Chris wasn't difficult. Every time he took the initiative to check in, kept a distance from female celebrities, and constantly video called me, my feelings for him grew even stronger. I realized that what I needed was someone like Chris, someone whose love was firm and unwavering. Anna's concert was in the works, and Chris and I visited the venue every day, driving her mad with our public displays of affection. You lovebirds, just go away. I asked Chris if he wasn't worried about being caught by reporters. He said he wasn't, since he had already prepared to retire from the spotlight. As long as I have you, nothing else matters. My heart raced, and I blushed as I watched him plant a soft kiss on the back of my hand. But fate had other plans. The day before Anna's concert, an accident occurred at the venue. As planned, Anna was supposed to descend from the ceiling in a flower basket. So the venue had started installing a suspended ceiling a few days prior. Chris and I were passing under the ceiling when, for some unknown reason, a steel pipe became loose, and the entire ceiling suddenly collapsed. Watch out! Chris leaped toward me, shielding me with his body. There was a loud crash, and I was suddenly weighed down, struggling to breathe. He let out a muffled groan, his body trembling in pain. Chris! Chris! I was frozen. Unable to move, desperately calling his name with all my strength. I'm fine, don't worry. Then, there was no more sound. Chris and I were sent to 2 different emergency rooms. In my struggle, I hit my head and passed out, but in reality, I wasn't seriously injured. Chris's back, however, was pierced by a steel pipe, nearly damaging his internal organs. The doctor said, fortunately, the injury wasn't in a critical area. With proper recovery, it won't affect his life. Only then did I allow myself to cry. I stayed by Chris's side every day during his month-long hospitalization. He smiled and said that this accident was actually worth it, since at least he got to see me every day. I covered his mouth, not allowing him to say any more things that would make me sad. His lips were pale, his face still a little pale from the injury. But his gaze toward me was incredibly gentle. He held my hand with a sincere look in his eyes. Connie, being with you is the luckiest thing that could happen to me. After being discharged, I moved in with Chris. He looked at me with a pitiful expression and asked, Darling, you really can't bear to let me stay home alone while I'm recovering? I avoided his burning gaze. I hired a professional caregiver and nutritionist for you. But Connie, all I want is you. I gave in. With some necessities, I briefly moved into Chris's apartment. Gradually, I stopped thinking about Howard. One weekend, while I was watching Crayon Shin-chan with Chris, my phone suddenly rang. Hello? There was no response from the other side. I had a feeling of what was coming. Just as I was about to hang up, a cold male voice rang in my ear. Connie, where are you now? When are you coming home? Chris heard it too. He shifted from lying lazily to sitting up straight, ears perked to listen to our conversation. My hand was tightly held in his, and the warmth of his palm reminded me of how much Chris cared. Looking at him, my heart grew even more determined. I'm at my lover's house. He'll get jealous, so please don't contact me again. I hung up the phone. Chris let out a sigh of relief and cupped my face, giving me a kiss. He bit my lip, speaking in a muffled voice, such a shameless man. Connie, from now on, you'll only love me. Every time he called my name, there was always an aggressive undertone. I tilted my neck to make it easier for him. Then, with moist eyes, I asked him, Do you love me? Chris didn't hesitate. Of course, I love you, Connie. That was great. I finally found someone who could firmly say, I love you. Suddenly, a gossip story took over the front pages of entertainment and financial news. The whistleblower claimed that Howard Spencer, the founder of a tech company, was actually a male escort. The accompanying photos included 10 years of rumors about Howard's affairs with the daughters of famous entrepreneurs and actresses, as well as the support these women provided for his tech company. Chris laughed hysterically. Howard is a male escort? Ha ha ha. That's a good description. What do you think? I didn't respond. Using his looks to exchange for company benefits, wasn't that exactly what Howard was, a male escort? I used to be so infatuated, thinking that Howard was a victim in all of this. But he was just greedy, addicted to beauty, and used countless excuses to enjoy the pleasures that money and power brought him. I was inevitably mentioned in the exposé. In the article, I was described as the loyal wife who stood by Howard during his humble beginnings, enduring his constant cheating, and finally selling my shares and leaving when I became disillusioned. The article was short and powerful, striking the heart, and it was incredibly persuasive. The best part was that it didn't exaggerate anything. The comments were full of sympathy for me, or they were full of curses for Howard, calling him a scumbag. The scandal between Howard and me became a huge sensation. However, Chris was fine with it, and I didn't care either. The stock price of my company barely fluctuated, while the biggest blow was to Olivia and Howard's company. Olivia's blind confidence in Howard's love was based on the assumption that he loved her with all his heart. Now that this assumption had been proven false, and she realized she was the homewrecker, she completely collapsed. She not only broke off the engagement but also withdrew the investment from her father, Mr. Miller, that had been given to Howard. The Miller family had deep roots in the business world and declared they would join forces with other companies to make Howard pay for his actions. As a result, Howard was hit with a series of blows. His company, which once seemed invincible, collapsed and was delisted within a month. I couldn't help but feel a little regretful, considering the company was one we had founded together, and half of its bloodline came from me. But even if it was delisted, Howard would still be set for life. One night, my private number rang. A strange woman's voice, crying, asked me, "Did you do this?" All I could do was sigh. "Olivia, I've already had someone tell you he's not a good man." Her sobs sounded so much like my old self. I had once been just as blindly stubborn, only turning back after getting badly hurt. Howard sold the company, making quite a bit of money. All I hoped for was that he would never have anything to do with me again. But the luxury cars lingering outside my building, the flowers and fruits sent to my company, and the messages from different numbers wishing me well on special days all pointed to the fact that Howard hadn't given up on me. Why wait until now to show me affection? Where was he before? He's just being pathetic. I didn't mind letting him spy on my sweet daily life with Chris. Those moments I once longed for, which now he could never have. Chris and I had set our wedding date for after Thanksgiving. I had met Chris's parents, and they were both very happy with me, not at all bothered by the rumors about my past. "We'll be family from now on." Chris whispered to me, "My mom really likes you. She admires your work ability so much. When I was secretly in love with you, she kept saying she wanted to meet you." I smiled gratefully at his mother. "Thank you for recognizing me." She didn't respond but simply smiled at me. Her eyes filled with expectation. I blinked back tears and sincerely repeated, "Thank you." The wedding went as planned. Guests came and went, and laughter filled the air. In the dressing room, I asked everyone to step out and wait for me, then stood before the mirror in my white wedding gown, admiring myself. I looked beautiful, Connie. As the clock struck, I was about to call my maid of honor in when a man suddenly barged into the room. The security guards behind him looked helpless. "We couldn't stop him, ma'am." He insisted on coming in, saying it's urgent. It was Howard, dressed in a white suit with several buttons undone, his hair disheveled, looking pitiful as he stared at me. "Connie, don't go with him." I held my bouquet and stared coldly at him. He had already become a stranger in my heart. I motioned for the security guards to take him away. He staggered and fell to one knee, his head raised, staring fixedly at the ring box in my hand, his eyes bloodshot. I spoke calmly, "I'm getting married. I've found someone I want to spend my life with. Please, go." I was just relieved that he wasn't crazy enough to burst into the ceremony halfway through. It was Chris's once-in-a-lifetime moment, and I didn't want it tainted by this interruption. Howard looked at me with pleading eyes. "Connie, you really don't love me anymore? You said you wanted to marry me, that we'd have a family. How can you break your promise?" "Really? I haven't loved you for a long time." Vows only matter when there's love. Howard's face quickly drained of color, as if he aged 10 years in an instant, slumping his shoulders and covering his face in tears. But you were with me for 10 years. Why spoil me and then abandon me? I know I was wrong. Out of everyone, you were the truest and the best to me. He leaned on his hands, his tears staining the carpet. I had never seen him look so pitiful, but I didn't feel sorry for him. Connie, what about the 10 years you spent loving me? What does that count for? I sighed and smiled helplessly. I guess it counts as bad luck on my part. The wedding went smoothly. When Chris placed the ring on my finger, a shadow stood in the corner. I didn't need to look closely to know who it was. But I no longer felt regret or pain. I turned my gaze to my partner beside me, and my thoughts drifted far into the future. A small home for Chris and me. From now on, I would no longer be alone. And